Welcome to the Radiant Energy Summit, where you'll learn the top insights and strategies for nurturing and optimizing your energy on all levels of your being. Our guest today is Dr. Roger Jahnke. Roger has dedicated his life to sharing the powerful, ancient healing traditions of China. With over 2 decades of clinical practice as a physician of traditional Chinese medicine and 8 research tours to China, Dr. Jahnke has practiced and taught Qigong in the United States, Canada, and Asia. He has studied hundreds of forms of Qigong with master teachers and visited over 20 hospitals, institutes, and training centers in China, focusing on the cultivation of Qi or vital energy. He's the author of The Healer Within and The Healing Promise of Qi. We welcome you, Roger, to our summit today.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I'm looking forward to it.
So what led you to do the work that you do? How did you get into the Qi? What's it about?
Yes. Okay. So I wouldn't say that I started getting into the Qi. What I would say is that I was shocked as a child by the premature passage of my father, who died when I was 10 years old. And while I think at the time I did everything that I could to seem like it was not that big a deal, I know now that it was definitely a big deal. And so before that time, if somebody said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" because people do that all the time, I would say, "I want to be a baseball player on the Cincinnati Redlegs team." And after my dad died, I would say that I want to be a doctor. Mm. So something happened there that drove me to have a longing for maybe to help other kids to not have to lose their father at such a young age, or, something like that.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so that was a turning point for you in your life. So if that didn't move you to do the Qi, what did? In other words, when we speak of Qi, we'll talk about it in more detail. If it means energy, you have many hundreds of definitions of Qi. What moved you into doing Qigong, Tai Chi, traditional Chinese medicine, and things like that? What did that answer for you as you began to study those?
Sure. When I did pursue becoming a doctor in pre-medical school, I found myself seeking mentorship and conversation about disease prevention. And when I talked to the people at the university, the comeback was always, well, we're doctors. We don't know anything about, or we don't know much about taking care of your health. We diagnose and treat disease. I found that quite alarming, actually. and it was the 1960s, and that I was predisposed to the whole idea of the era, which was, peace and love and all of that. And so in getting this sort of startling information about how doctors don't do prevention, I dropped out of medical school, and I became a back to the land kind of person eventually. But before that, I finished college in world literature, where we read the Tao Te Ching, and the Tao Te Ching would say things like, if you want to get something done, notice what the universe is doing and do that, because then whatever you want to get done will happen spontaneously. Another thing that the Tao Te Ching says is, can you calm your mind? It's like a doctor, Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, would be saying, as if he was your doctor, can you calm down? And can you regulate your breath and keep your body as flexible as a newborn with no cares? And can you turn your attention inward to find that ocean of light out of which everything else arises? And I thought, okay, that's it. That's what I want to be a doctor of. And then Chinese medicine and so forth, and Qigong and Tai Chi are an inherent part of Chinese medicine. And so I was sailing off then into, I really understand, or I want to understand, and learn about and practice how to organize, sustain, enhance, and refine this internal and universal energy called Qi.
Mm. So it sounds like the model that presented itself was not the model that resonated with you.
In medical school, that is correct.
Yes, yeah. What didn't resonate? I don't think I've ever asked you this question before.
Well,
Would
it's
you?
just the whole idea of waiting. The doctor waits until the person has lost their health. So the whole concept of medicine in the Western world is founded on the idea that you've lost your health. How do we call it a healthcare system? I have no idea, because it's not a healthcare system. It is a medical intervention financing system. But when we say healthcare, we mean medical intervention financing. And I was interested in supporting people in living their life in a way that was expressive of what would maximize healing resources, naturally occurring healing resources within our own being. So we could say this: how did you stay well as long as you did? And the answer would be, well, because my own natural capacity to produce internal factors that support function were working well. Then, well, how did you lose your health? Well, apparently, those natural occurring functional features of my being and my well-being were working well, and then somehow they became less able. So my capacity for sustaining well-being became deficient, it became restrained, it became encumbered in some way. Now, how did that happen? Well, that happened through my worry, it happened through my not understanding what nutrition is all about, it happened through my nobody ever said, hydration, nobody ever said, get out in nature as much as you can. Nobody ever said, do Tai Chi and Qigong, which I think is a very top level idea for how to maximize and sustain health or healing capacity.
Hmm. Yeah. So we've talked about the word chi several times now, and if you can define it so that a person who's just getting into it, what is chi? I know there's a lot of universal definitions for it, but what's a practical definition of what chi means?
Well, first, let's just say that Qi is universal, and it is a feature of nature that is invisible, but is, with living things, very associated with being alive, being vital, being creative, being agile and responsive. And so for the average person, the concept of qi is, what about myself, according to Chinese medicine theory, is going right when things are well, and what about myself has become restrained or encumbered when I'm not well? And so the Chinese would say, yeah, we get it. There's blood, there's lymph, there's some kind of neurological system here. There's a digestive system. There's an immune system, and in the Chinese purview, all of that operates because of the ample presence and capacity of qi. And so, if you think to yourself, what is digestion? We could say, well, you put food in your mouth, you chew it, it goes into your stomach, it's partially digested there, and then it goes into your small intestine where nutrients are extracted, and then it goes into your large intestine where it's prepared to discharge as waste. So then the next question is, well, but how does that work? What is the underlying presence of this? That's where we would put the chi. What is the underlying availability of energetic resources? What
Good.
is the underlying availability of functional capacity. That's what qi is. And then when functional capacity depreciates, then the Chinese would call that a deficiency of qi. And when functional capacity is stunned or struck or hit, like in bruising or bone breaking or cuts or any of that, then that's called stagnant qi. So when the qi is either depreciated or the qi is injured and stalled or stagnant, those are the two reflections of how the qi can become dysfunctional or deranged from its optimum.
Yeah, good. So, in your Healer Within book, which was the first connection I ever had with your work, you tell the story of a woman who was involved in a serious car accident. Can you share a little of that story and why it's so absolutely, literally breathtaking, and yet what the woman learned about her own breath and qi? Because it's an amazing story, Roger.
Yeah, fascinating. So this woman came to a presentation that I made at the National Wellness Institute decades ago. And after my presentation, she came up and she started talking to me about her situation. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I think I actually did Qigong when I had this accident, and I have to tell you about it." So I'm driving on black ice. It's very slick. Circumstances arranged things, and I don't remember the details. And so my car went off the road and rolled many times into a agricultural field, and I was it was upside down, and I was crunched and pressed, and they got me out with the saw thing that. And they took me to the hospital, and my spleen was ruptured, and I didn't know where I was, and I was unconscious. And as I came conscious, they said, "You've had a horrible accident. You probably have a concussion. Your spleen is ruptured, or we think your spleen might be ruptured. Other organs may be damaged as well. Some of your ribs are broken, and so we have to keep you here in the hospital for a day to see if we can figure out, like, you're not in imminent danger of death, but you may be. So we're not clear, and we need to watch you." And so she was then in the ICU, and the was all hooked up to these devices and beeping machines and so forth. And part of the equipment was that she was intubated, meaning that there was a breathing device that was breathing for her, and then at some point she noticed that if she took the breath herself, that she could get this image that was on a like a computer to change around. And so she came upon this idea. Maybe she had heard about it somewhere. I think she said something like, some spiritual leader, or maybe Jesus or Moses or somebody like that said, God is in your breath. And she had the background to think, well, I want more God inside of me. And so she started doing these breath practices to get the image on the computer to expand, like when she would, instead of being breathed by the device, she would breathe on her own, even though her ribs were hurting, and she had a lot of pain medication. And so she was taking these very large, deep breaths. And one of the things that I said in my lecture was, when you take large, deep breaths, there are a bunch of things that happen. One is that your body reduces natural pain relievers. Two, it pumps the lymphatic system, which removes waste products from between the tissue spaces and so forth. And so the medical people then would come back and say, you're still under careful watch, but it appears that maybe you're not going to die, and your spleen is ruptured, but it's not doing the worst thing that it could do. And she said, she probably wrote on a notepad or something because she's intubated. I'm not sure how it went. I've been doing these deep breathing exercises. Do you think that's helping? And they said, absolutely. It looks like that must be helping because we thought you were going to die. And then, later she shows up and tells me this story, proving that she lived and suggesting that the breath practice that she stumbled upon on her own due to something that someone had said early in her life and due to the fact that she was noticing this computer image, and she put it all together and may have saved her life and certainly calmed herself down. And because of the nature of the mechanisms, the calming down portion has to do with the chest breath, and the pumping the lymphatic system has to do with the belly breath or the diaphragmatic breath. So she was putting these two very powerful Qigong practices into play, even though she'd never heard of Qigong.
Awesome.
Yeah, very awesome.
And I remember to this day when I first read that. In fact, I've shared that story with dozens, if not hundreds of people through teleseminars, friends. A good friend of ours had another friend who fractured vertebrae in their back, and she said she couldn't move. And that story came to me immediately. I thought, you know what she can do? She can breathe. That doesn't take any extra effort. And so from the broken bone point of view, or in an accident, when we're having moments of overwhelm, which in putting together this whole summit, I've had plenty of them. This last, let's say 24 to 48 hours, I've had to step back and just say, okay, can I let go of the outcome? Can I let go of thinking that all this stuff needs to get done? I did notice a tightness in my chest. Nothing close to any heart issues, by the way. More so just literally that the muscles were tight. And upon practicing the breath, wouldn't you know it, Roger, you're spot on. And it's the thing that's kind of crazy, like when you ask a fish, how's the water? And the fish says, what water? What are you talking about? So you ask a human, how's the breathing? What?
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah.
you're
And
trained.
people say that all the time, like, I'm already breathing. So what's the
Really.
deal? But here's the difference, is that we have the capacity to survive, and the breath pacing that we naturally do to make our way through the day, oxygenate the blood and anything else that's associated with breath, is happening at around 16 to 22 breaths a minute. But when we change the breath, the first thing that happens is that you have to decide to, particularly when you're tense. Well, just as you described a moment ago, we can get all tangled up in what's going on, and then the natural, for better or worse, the natural tendency is to breathe less deeply and more frequently, which doesn't pump the lymphatic system because it's not a deep enough breath to do so, and it doesn't trigger the mechanism for the release of these calming internal drugs. The Chinese call these internal resources that we have the capacity to turn on and make happen when we decide that we want to. That those the internal pharmacy. When you take that big deep chest breath, and let's everybody do that now. Just adjust your posture so that you can take a very deep belly breath, dropping the diaphragm, and then take a very deep chest breath, and even hold it for a few seconds if you want to, and then let it out very slowly. When we do that, we're activating these profound mechanisms which were placed into the human system by the architect of the universe and living beings. And we could ask the question, what's the difference and why? Well, the usual breathing is to survive. The conscious breathing is to thrive and maximize and purposefully transition into the medicine making state. One of the things we say is the most profound medicine is produced within the human body for no cost. How do we do that? Well, adjust the posture, deepen the breath, clear the mind. And you yourself said I got overwhelmed. So then how do we get a hold of ourselves? How can we get a hold of ourselves and know that we're not only just thriving, but probably just thriving kind of. And how do we get a hold of ourselves to be able to say, I am aware of the fact that I am compromising my well-being. I am aware of the fact that I'm compromising my capacity to make decisions. And I have made the decision in my life previous to this moment, because you have to decide while you're well. It doesn't work to decide when you're not well, particularly if you're hysterical not well. And so then I made a plan in my life. I've disciplined myself. I have studied these practices. I'm investing my intention into the concept of being able to make the choice to be well. And therefore, even though I am stressed, and even though I have too much to do, and even though I think that I'm going to get more done if I keep going at this stressed pace, I'm going to stop. There's a lot of power in a person who can actually recognize that they've crossed into, sort of mild hysteria and have shut down their self-healing capacity.
Yes.
To be able to say, I know I have to stop, and then to actually stop, and then implement the practice of slowing the breath down. And of course, it's best if we not only slow the breath down, but we actually get out of the chair, move around, wave, like in Tai Chi, we say, hands like clouds. So now bring in an image of I'm standing on a mountain, wherever you are listening to this interview. Take a moment. If you don't feel like you can stand up, don't stand up. You can do this sitting down. But if you do feel like you could stand up, then stand up and sink into your knees a little bit and take a few deep, relaxed breaths. And then start passing your hands very slowly in any way you want to. So let's don't get too far into the details. Pass your hands before your eyes, like maybe one hand passes, and then later the next hand comes past, and they can pass in either direction. It doesn't matter. And imagine where you would have to be watching clouds passing in front of you. So you're not on the ground unless you're, I don't know, at the top of in a village at the top of a mountain. The clouds are always above us. So not only did we get out of our chair, shift our posture, we're moving the body. Now we're slowing the breath down, and we're imagining, using the mind to be in the present moment, having an imagination about clouds passing, and see if you can link the breath. So I'm assuming that everybody's out there doing hands like clouds right now. And you can just imagine, as I breathe in, the cloud passes, or as I breathe out, the cloud passes. Don't worry about which one, it doesn't matter. Just slow down, lengthen your spine, lift your head up on top, pass your hands in front of your face, one and then the other at a slow, restful pace, and imagine to yourself, where must I be if the clouds are in front of me? The answer is not in an airplane. We're in some kind of marvelous, rarefied circumstance where clouds are in front of us, probably high in mountains. I've been in the mountains in China many times. It's very inspiring to be in those sacred places with those clouds coming and going. Sometimes you're in the clouds, sometimes the sky opens up. But you can just see as we're doing this that the amount of time that I just took to explain the thing that we're talking about was maybe 2 minutes. So it's not as if we have to go to the gym. It's not as if we have to change our outfit. It's not as if we have to do anything much. And in fact, if we wanted to take a shorter break, we could take what we call a 10-second break. And a 10-second break is simply a big breath in and a very slow, relaxed breath out. And those are some of the most powerful tools. If you go to any culture, any shamanic culture, any indigenous culture in the world, and you sit with the what we might want to call the medicine person, one of the first things that they will do is teach you to slow yourself down, shift your perspective, in many cases, adjust your posture or do some kind of gesture. And that's like magic. That's like, you couldn't get a drug that is so perfectly suited to calming you down anywhere in the world for any money that would be as reasonable and, in fact, profound as the medicine, the drug, the internal pharmaceutical, the elixir, if you want to call it that you can produce within your own being by stopping or slowing down, changing perspective, and deepening the breath.
Agreed. Aho.
Aho.
Yeah. Many years ago when I learned about the power of the breath, and it's funny when we say learning, Roger, are we really learning anything new, or is it a part of us already knew it and it's reminding us of the knowing of it?
It's the remembering.
Yes, exactly. The great teachers. There's an old line from a song by Enigma that says, "There's no teacher who can teach anything new. They only help us to remember what we already know on the inside." That's what great teachers do. It's not so. And on the opposite end of that is, something like confabulation, where we know it all. No, that's okay. Breathing, I know breathing. Really? How are you feeling? And that's not to be smart alecky about it, but seriously, how are you feeling right now? Well, I'm feeling kind of tense. Okay, would you like to do a little breathing? I don't have the time. I thought you said you knew breathing. Breathing is right?
Righto.
Yeah, and that's not to be silly. I'm sorry, that's not to be smart alecky about it. It's to be, can I step back and let go of my need to know something, go into the not knowing of it, start with beginner's mind, and we're filled with chi again. We're filled with inspired. You won't get inspired unless you breathe right. So I love how you've just made that incredibly simpler for us. I love the hands like clouds. I haven't had that experience before until you just shared that with me. And I had muted myself and I was kind of like yawning in the background because I'm getting all this extra oxygenation from those clouds. Amazing. Truly amazing.
I love what you just said, by the way, and it's a great moment to just put a hold on and to review that inspire. If you go to the dictionary, it will tell you that there are two definitions to inspire. One is to breathe in, and the other is to be filled with spirit.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting that they both that one word has those two amazing meanings?
Yeah. Yeah, and what I was also going to share, and thank you for reminding me of it as well, is that in all the great traditions of the world, the word breath in those cultures means, Shakti, prana, mana. It all means to be in touch with the spirit. And one of the things I love about the Hawaiian language is when you say aloha, the ha is the breath.
Yep.
It's absolutely within every word, every intonation in the Hawaiian culture and many of the indigenous cultures, if not all of them. And so the problem here in the West is that we've lost our connection with the very life force, the breath. And I remember doing some teleseminars years ago, and I was asked to be a guest, and this person asked me, so what's the greatest challenge, or how do you solve the problem of X? Didn't matter what the question was. I went a little too ultra simple, Roger, and my response was, let's get in touch with our breath. Let's do a little exercise. And at the end of the exercise, the host said, well, yeah, that sounds really good, but how do you fix the problem, Paul? And I said, okay, I don't think we got through there. Belly breathing is when you release. Chest breathing, different than the way you defined it, by the way, but what I mean is tight breathing. You know you're breathing tight when you're stressed. And so being up in the mind is tight breathing. It's shallow breathing. They have a word for it in Hawaiian called haole, and it means man of shallow breath. And so when we breathe, we could call it like chi breathing. right? I mean, that's essentially what you're teaching here is not just.
Well, actually, during certain eras of the Chinese culture, if you wanted to translate qi gong, qi gong into the English language, the translation would be breath practice, gong being like work or repeating something till you get good at it, and qi being, we said, universal energy as it's present within our own being. But certain translators actually translate qi as breath.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking back, even before you talked about the woman who had the ruptured spleen, this process of breathing, of what it does for us, this great elixir within is what I'm hearing. And so how do you, what's the question to ask? Let's ask spirit, like, what's the question we should be asking right now? Is it not what is the breath, and not why we forget? What's the next question, Roger, about the breath, about the qi?
Well, okay. My next question would be, why is it that when we need to do something for ourselves the most, we are the least likely to do it? And I think one of the great answers is that my mom used to say, God helps those who help themselves. And I'm not sure that actually ever appeared in the Bible, but it's a church statement.
Yeah, it's a church thing.
And so if we said to ourselves, why, if the breath is so important, why did God or the architect of the universe or the grand Tao or whatever it is that's in charge of the experience that we're having, why didn't they just build it in that the breath was always deep? And here's my answer to that. I think, and it's just a personal opinion, it doesn't have to be the opinion of anyone else, it's just something that I, as a thoughtful person, feel is what I return to as a guiding central ideal, that life as a human isn't necessarily intended to be all perfect. It's intended as an opportunity to cultivate spiritual capacity in the four dimensions where we are, to some extent, separated from our spirit or neglect that aspect of ourself, or however you like to say that. So if we said that the architect of the universe built the breath so that you could survive, but that as a being, you are challenged with the potential of discovering and then implementing how to thrive. And so the fact that the breath isn't perfect, and the fact that the Lord of the universe, or whatever we want to call that, didn't make it so that we're naturally doing the best we can with the breath, it then actually segments the total human race into, there's many ways to segment the human race, of course, but in this case, we're segmenting the human race into those who have discovered the breath as a power tool and those who think that that's silly. And in a way, it's not like political parties, but it's like people who have different perspectives.
Yeah.
And in all the ancient cultures, there's this one really cool idea that I like a lot, and that is, when you do your gratitudes, be sure to remember to be grateful for having taken a life in a context where you could discover these things. So be grateful for taking a life in a land where there's in a territory where there's a medicine person. Be grateful in your life to have bumped into Paul Bauer's Radiant Energy Summit. To be grateful in your life to know what is a Buddha, to be grateful in your life to have access to water and food. You know, I mean, you can do all those gratitudes, but the ones I'm talking about are to have been exposed to certain ideas, tried them out, found them relevant, and used them. Because how often do we walk down the street and you could just count like the hundreds of people that you pass that you know that if you ask them, have you discovered the power of your breath? They would just laugh and say, what kind of a dumbass are you asking me that question? I'm breathing all the time. I'm breathing now. Don't bother me. Yeah. Whereas, you know, out of 1,000, there might be somebody who would say, oh my gosh, when I discovered the power of the breath, it changed my life. I use it every day. I use it to fall asleep. I use it to wake up. I use it to reduce my my load of complexity in my life. I use it as a way to remember to say no sometimes. I use the breath as a way to be able to arrive at what is my next yes or my next thumbs up.
Yeah. So very cool. So now this goes on to our next question, which would be: you speak of the three treasures, and you know I've not studied Qi anywhere near as long or as much in depth as you have, but what are the three treasures, and why are they significant for us? Us, you know, us folks who don't do the Qi all the time.
Yes. Okay. So, well, there's, you know, there's many interpretations of the power of the word of the concept of three. You know, in the traditions of the different spiritual traditions, there are often the three this and the three that. You know, in the Catholic Church, there's the Holy Spirit, and I don't remember what they are actually, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
I'm revealing myself as a sort of pantheist, you know, who worships nature here. But as the tribes of China discovered how to share with each other, you know, what is the nature of the world, one of the first concepts is the three treasures. And the first interpretation of the three treasures is that there is the earth below us, which is a substance, and the sky above us, which is an open space, and that which lies in between, which is ourselves, the living things. So one interpretation of the three treasures is to think about myself in between. What am I made up of? Well, I'm made up of the body, which is a substance, and I've made up of the heart, feelings, the intelligence, and even the spiritual aspect of self, which are not a substance. So I am a composite of two incredible and highly various qualities, a physical quality, and then all of the non-physical qualities, which include the emotions, the intellect, the spiritual self, and the chi itself, which is also not a thing. So that's earth below, sky above, and that which is the merging of the two in the middle called life. That's three treasures. Another three treasures is the yin below and the yang above. So when the Chinese talk about yin and yang, they're talking about yin is like stones are yin, water is yin. Anything that if you hold out anything that's yin and let it go, it will drop. And yang is if you hold out fire, it rises. If you hold out wind, it does not fall. And so there are things that rise, which are yang, and there are things that fall, which are yin. And then that which is in between is the combination of yin and yang, which, by the way, has the name Tai Chi. People say, well, wait, I thought Tai Chi was an exercise. Well, Tai Chi is named, the Tai Chi, the exercise, is named after these three treasures, yin and yang, merging into the whatever the merging is. And of course, you may have seen what we call the yin yang symbol, which is a white side and a black side, looks a little bit like fish swimming. That yin yang symbol is called, in the Chinese language, that's called Tai Chi Tu, means a map of Tai Chi. What is the map of Tai Chi? Is a picture of how the yin and the yang merge. So that's a kind of three treasures. And then the third one, and there are more, but we'll leave it at that, is the three treasures of the practice of Qigong and Tai Chi, which is also the practice of yoga, which is also the practice of mindfulness, which is also the practice of what is called cortical field re-education and Feldenkrais and Alexander technique and even Zumba, which is the whole idea of managing the body, managing the breath, and managing the mind. So sometimes we chant posture, breath, and mind. Posture, breath, and mind. So as we're all listening here, we could say, okay, well, I'm going to do the three treasures. I'm going to adjust my posture, regulate my breath on purpose. So rather than breathing unconsciously, I'm going to breathe consciously now. Changing your breath is a consciousness practice. And then I'm going to clear the mind. And here's a fun little practice for clearing the mind. It goes like this. You put your right hand out to the right, and you put your left hand out to the left. And then you put your past into one of those hands, and you put your future into the other of those hands. And then, with purpose and intent, and I hope everybody's doing this because it's a beautiful little momentary practice. The past is in one hand, the future is in the other hand. Bring your hands together in what we call prayer hands, like a namaste gesture, called the namaste gesture in yoga, called prayer hands in China. I don't know what the Chinese word is for that. So do it again. So your past is in one hand, your future is in the other hand. You bring the past and the future together and you can use a phrase that's used in quantum physics all the time, which is collapse the past and the future into the present, which is then the portal to the eternal self. So this is gorgeous. This is classic. This is across all indigenous cultures, that when we disassociate from the past and the future, and in this case, do this little gesture of bringing our hands together in prayer hands, say to ourselves, with purpose and intent, I now focus on the present moment. And that's almost like saying a kind of a magic phrase, like open sesame would be, or abracadabra. Past and the future collapse into the present, opens the portal to the eternal self.
Absolutely love that. Can you say that one more time? I know you said it twice, but to let it sink in, to allow us to...
Yeah. And before I say it, let's just say that Einstein didn't say this, but all the people, after Einstein deconstructed the Newtonian view, everybody was scrambling, trying to figure out, well, okay, so relativity, we get it, everything's relative, all right, okay for that, but then what? What are the fundamentals of nature? Because time and space and weight and size basically became secondary after Einstein instead of primary in terms of discussing or describing the nature of the universe.
Right.
And the quantum community, who used this phrase to describe the whole idea of how we get the dimensions that we're in and have the experiences that we're having. And that is that we expand the present into an experience of what we can call time, past, and future. So this gesture, which is it's like a little Qigong movement, is you put your right hand out to the right, you put your left hand out to the left, you bring your hands together and say to yourself, now, with purpose and intent, I collapse the past and the future into the present, which is the portal. The present is the portal to the eternal nature.
There's a part of me, Roger, my ego wants to say I can't get enough of that. That's not what I mean. It's that I'm speechless.
Well, when the ego can't get enough of this, you're in good shape, because in most cases, people argue. And I was just at teaching at a retreat center, and the people in the class were saying, I never thought about that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I have to think about this. I'm not sure I'm going to get it by the end of the week. And of course I would say, well, you don't have to get it. It's just a thought. It's an idea. It may not even be true.
Right.
But those egos are saying, wait a minute. And your ego is saying, I can't get enough of this, which is basically the code words for I want to be in this state more, which is a code word, by the way. And here comes the bad news for many people. I want to have more peace. I want to have more well-being. Requires, here it comes, discipline.
Yeah.
Oops, there's the problem. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
I'm not disciplined. I don't want to talk about it. I don't have time for it. I'm overwhelmed. I have to work harder, not smart, all that stuff.
So at the very end of that statement, and I'm giving my paraphrase version, I now collapse, with purpose and intent, I now collapse the past and future into the present and open the portal to my eternal self. Can you help us understand what this, a lot of us may understand what the eternal self is, but what is it to you? For Roger?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's this whole idea that's it's really challenging. And anybody who does not feel well, or anyone who's in a troubling situation, is probably not going to like this idea very much. But it is an expression of the great wisdom teaching. So I think it's worthy that we share this idea. And it goes like this. There's an aspect of myself which is eternally well, cannot get sick, and does not die. So just that right there, just the fact that anybody, anywhere could put those words together and expect that the listener would be anything but dumbfounded. There's an aspect of myself which is eternally well, cannot get sick, and does not die. Wow, that sounds like poppycock and dreamer. But if we think about it, there are people who, when they are not well, are referencing back to an aspect of themselves which is invincible. I personally am fairly well, so I don't know, I go to the dentist and that really hurts, and I do my breath practices and so forth. But I've never really been in a situation where I was confronted with the fact that the body, let's say before its time, is deconstructing towards a spiral or a trajectory towards death. That the whole idea of not being upset there is almost like incomprehensible to me. And yet, I have met people who have that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Who, when they are not well, are in some way tapping into an aspect of themselves which is well. And I've met many people as a doctor who have been in my qigong classes and have been in my in the trainings, and have been patients of mine in Chinese medicine, who clearly were on a trajectory towards losing their life, and somehow had, I don't know, they were just at peace with it, and how that works is a very, very powerful tool. And the shamans and the wizards and the gurus would tell you that being able to carry with you a sense of peace and well-being in the midst of complex circumstances is the definition of enlightenment and healing.
Yeah, profound. I don't think it's that hard to get. I mean, we think of these wake-up calls that we have for these dark nights of the body, soul, mind, whatever. We all have instances of where we feel separate from that which we want. We don't feel the love. We don't feel the harmony, whatever it might be. And the question is, A, are we hearing the signal? B, how do you interpret the signal? I mean, if you're taking notes right now, this is profound stuff. So if we slow down enough, like what Roger is referring to, and we, you know, you don't have to do cloud hands in the middle of your office. What you can do is like imagine it and slow down for a moment or two and listen to your body as it's sending that signal that you're feeling tense, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not yourself, so to speak. And that's a call back. And what I'm getting, Roger, from what you're just saying is, so the soul, we don't have to be like, advanced students to kind of understand this, but the soul creates these experiences so that we'll remember something, we fall off of ourselves. Yeah. We leave ourselves, in the words of another author in our speakers, like we have moments where we let go of remembering ourselves so that we'll appreciate the contrast when we come home and remember it again. Wow. Hey, honey, you're beautiful. Hey, honey, I was here the whole time. No, you're gorgeous today. Or the kids, my God, I see my kids' eyes again, instead of just looking past them, or whatever the many examples we have of not being in the moment. And yeah, it's part of, I don't know if it's the great mystery, but it's one of our great mysteries as humans. Why don't we always pay attention to what's important? So this is special, what we're embracing here and what we're gathering. So how would you like to begin to close here? Like, what are the things that you'd like to give as a gift, so to speak, from the chi field for people to remember about themselves?
Well, we have been lingering on the power of breath, so I want to be sure that we put a little exclamation point by the breath as a power tool in daily life, which we can implement, that does not have a cost, and that typically we can use no matter where we are. So, often with New Age stuff, it says things like, don't operate heavy equipment while you're doing this practice. And actually, if you become more alert to the present moment while you're driving your car, that's probably a really good idea. If you become alert to the presence of a pathway to peace when you're answering an email that has you up into your stress, that is a powerful tool to be able to assure that you use your empathetic or empathic language, use your positive communication skills. Don't forget that the other person is having an experience too, and maybe even be curious about what that person is thinking as they're saying these things that you maybe disagree with. And so the breath is this amazing feature of our being, which changes us physiologically, which can change us emotionally in a few moments, and which puts us into a higher level of presence with with the aspect of ourself which is typically neglected, our spiritual self. So definitely that. Then piece 2 is discipline. I remember as a kid, we would say the D word. Anytime anybody would say the word discipline, we'd all look at each other and say, in a kind of a funny voice, we'd say the D word, meaning, why do we have to listen to these people talking about discipline? But then, as we mature ourselves, we realize that everything, if we're thoughtful, which is a kind of discipline, if we think before we speak, That's a discipline. We didn't learn that immediately because as a child we just wham, I want. But eventually we have to realize, okay, I'm not going to win every game here. When is it best for me to reserve the I want phrase and those kinds of things? So discipline is to be able to not only believe in the fact that there's a way to thrive and that there's believe in the fact that there's a way that we can maximize our well-being and believe in the fact that there's a way to be able to make a plan in our lives that assists us in moving forward towards what we intend and prefer. So all of that is going to come down to the discipline, the food discipline, the rest discipline, the hydration discipline, the addictions modification type disciplines and so forth. So then, period, like that. And then the third thing that I would say is that notice that when you go to these summits and hear these interviews with all these people, notice that they're all saying the same thing. They're all just saying the same thing in different ways using different modalities. We've got the numerology people, we got the colors and the chakra people, we got the yoga people, we got the nutrition people, and we got the special formulas of nootropics, like all the breakthrough stuff in nourishing and how to ultra nourish or use superfoods. But in the end, everybody's really pointing to the idea of modifying the nervous system, becoming less triggered to aggravated states, and being thoughtful and communicating with others, not just to make a point, but also to share and be curious. So we have a collaborative experience. And then finally, I would say, how much does it take? Really, I mean, notice really closely. The worst thing about having to go to the gym is going to the gym. What can I do at home? Can I create a space in my living room, in my den? Can I create a space in my yard where I go and take some deep breaths and do some movements from Tai Chi or Qigong, like waving hands as if they are clouds? And creating a circumstance. The ancients say, provide an arrangement. So what does that mean? It means arrange things, arrange time, arrange furniture, arrange appointments, arrange mindset, arrange belief system to accommodate to the fact that there's a way to make medicine without going anywhere that is amazing. The medicine that we make within us using these tools that we've been describing cannot be purchased. Cannot be purchased. You can only have it for free. And the arrangements need to be made so that that can occur.
Yeah, I love it. So thank you, brother, for all of your kindness and the sharing of the chi and helping us remember how to cultivate it, because that's the word that was going through my mind. It's like, how do I cultivate the chi after if modifying the nervous system is one of the keys, so I don't need to know what the sympathetic parasympathetic really means, and even though we're into it, Roger, I think what is important is, how do I feel? Do I feel good or not good? It's that simple.
And what can I do?
Yeah, feel not good. That's the signal your body's sending to you that been running some extra stuff, don't want to get deficient here. It's giving me some signals. Step back, notice, breathe, and cultivate that, And then I can add my practices to it. If there's any discipline, it's the noticing. That's, I think, the great discipline is to step back.
That is the great discipline. And noticing and then having within reach. That's why the three treasures is so powerful, because shift the posture, shift the breath, shift the mind. That gets you there. That's the tool, or one of the tools.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again for who you are, Roger, and what you share, and helping us remember how important it is to cultivate that which is, that is who we are, the power of the breath, the power of the chi. Thank you, my friend.
Yes, and many blessings to you and everyone, and shall we say aloha.
Hello with ha.